If you find yourself going on dates, but somehow it never goes anywhere, maybe ask yourself, am I doing something that's
Mhm.
actually turning people away? Thank you so much for joining us again on Second Act TV. I want to welcome back Joni Caldwell Lerner, the dating coach, relationship expert, and the creator of the brand new course, Dating Reboot Real Love After 50. Joni, thanks for being here.
Yes, my pleasure.
Well, Joni, what we want to talk about today, that we put so much effort into finding someone. Maybe you finally found someone online, or you're there, you're going on a date, and then you do things unintentionally or subconsciously that actually turns people away. So if you find yourself, going on dates, but somehow it never goes anywhere, or just, something is not quite right, maybe ask yourself, am I doing something that's
Mhm.
actually turning people away?
Yeah, so especially if you're out there and you keep saying, I get the first date, but nothing happens after that. What is the common denominator?
So, number one here, you have closed body language. That's very unconscious or subconscious, especially when you're with somebody new. And interestingly enough, is that 50% of any initial impression or connection is dependent on your body language. So it's a really important piece when you first meet someone, right?
Yes, absolutely. So if they're talking and you lean in a little bit, somebody leans into you, that you know that they're interested in what they're saying. If they're looking around the room, and I've had this happen where they're looking at everybody but me. They're looking at the waitress, they're looking at her butt, they're looking at the person next door. I mean, what's the message? I am not the most important person in this conversation, in this moment. If they're doing this, I mean, that's obvious. Very closed body. We talked about this once on one segment. If at all possible, maybe sit at an angle on the table instead of right across from each other, because that's a confrontational positioning. So
Interesting.
maybe,
Like a
yeah,
dining,
sit
yeah.
next to the person if possible. If it's in a booth, sit on the same side. It's a little harder to, turn and you're right in their face, but just be conscious of
Mhm.
the body language piece of this. What are the signs giving off? And even when you cross your legs, if they cross their legs going that way, you cross their legs going that way. Now you're mirroring, this is neurolinguistic programming. Now you're mirroring their body language, and they'll subconsciously feel comfortable with you.
Yeah, there is an absolutely there's ways like you just explained to make somebody feel comfortable and to invite them in. And
Mhm.
people, especially if you're a little introverted or shy, you do have a tendency to close yourself off, and that comes across loud and clear. What
Right.
also comes across loud and clear is your point too, that you speak in a monotone voice. Now think about that after body language, as it says here, your tone of voice accounts for 30% of your potential, how you relate to a date, potentially how you relate to a date, 30%. So now 80%, we just covered 80% of
Right.
what is involved with making that first impression. So, what does that mean? A monotone voice.
They've done studies after study after study about what is it that makes somebody charismatic. Well, it's the way they speak. It's the modulation of their voice. It's using their hands as well. So if you are sitting there and you're telling them all about your exciting trip to Europe, that's a little obvious, but actually, I would record yourself. If you're somebody who suspects that you may have this issue in terms of, because you can hear the way my voice goes up and down and it pulls you in and that kind of thing. Record yourself and then you can work on it.
And it might be easy for us to say that because that's sort of our business. Although I think that being, talking in a monotone voice can almost take as much effort as putting some peaks and valleys or something into it.
And I think you're right, Silka. Absolutely. And for a woman, for example, she might not want to take up space and she might be a little
Mm.
shy. So practice with a friend. Really take up the space, really be confident. What would a confident person sound like? And if it's a man, it's kind of the opposite. Sometimes they're really loud
Mhm.
and they're taking up all of the space.
The other thing is, and we've talked about this too, just for you to be more interesting, you actually, maybe don't speak much at all if you're not that outgoing. Ask questions about the person, and like Joni said, lean in when you do. Maybe pick that tone up a little bit. But the more interest you show in conveying information, the more interesting you will be.
Right. So tell me more about that.
Mhm.
See, that's a question. Tell me more about that, Silka. That's a really interesting point. Where did you learn that? Ask questions, absolutely. And they feel very seen and they feel like you're really super interesting
Mhm.
because you're interested.
Here, point three is you answer questions generally. Now, what do they mean by that? That connections are made in details.
So let's say you say to this new person in front of you, do you like to travel? And the person
Mhm.
says, I do.
Yeah. Yeah, sure.
That doesn't go anywhere. But you can say, yeah, I really do. I really feel like I'm able to be the best version of myself when I'm traveling.
Mhm.
I love different languages. It fascinates me. I learn something a little bit in each country. And then the person can say, well, what's your favorite country?
Mhm.
Ah, well, I would say Ireland, partly
Mhm.
because it's my heritage and partly because the people are lovely. And so you can
Mhm.
see I'm adding detail and I'm
Yeah.
fleshing it out as I go.
Yeah, and you're giving them enough information to engage in a conversation.
Mhm.
They might have the same problem you do. I mean, people, a
Well, there's
lot
a
of people,
generosity of spirit when
yeah,
you actually engage. If you're just doing this, so now we're back to the body language and you're kind of looking away. And yeah, I love to travel. I mean, you're making
yeah,
the other person work.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah, and it is very frustrating if you're trying and to engage someone, it's just not happening. So you're definitely running people off. Maybe they want to run you off. I don't know. That could be too.
and they get to go home and be right about how horrible dating is. They run you off,
Yes,
and then you get to be
right.
right. Anyway.
I love this point here. RBF, resting bitch face. I love it because, especially as we age, the resting bitch face sets in more and more, and we're not even aware of it. And I think I've mentioned that on the show too. Is when I interview people, and like right now, I'm talking with you, and you're sitting there. See, have you have a little smile on your face? A lot of times, people listen intently, and have no idea what they look like. And we do that in real life. And that's what I want people to be aware of, to always have that just a slight smile.
Resting bitch face. I believe I've told this story before, but when my 2-year-old was my 28-year-old was two, she said to me, Mama, why are you mad? And I said, I'm not mad. She said, you have a mad face on. And I actually went to the mirror and looked and I realized that I have resting bitch face. So I've
Mm-hmm.
worked on it over the years. And again, because of our business and that kind of thing, I am conscious of my face all the time
Mm-hmm.
when on.
Mm-hmm.
What when you're just resting, what does it look like?
Mm-hmm.
Like my face falls, everything's falling. But welcome to being, 64.
It's a great thing to be aware of, but it has to be pointed out to you. And I really became aware of it when I started second act and editing, the editing portion of it, because the way that some of the guests looked, I knew they were interested, but at first I thought, God, she really doesn't like to be interviewed. Yeah, it makes the other people think that there's something wrong, or certainly not inviting, to where you're unconsciously running them off, which is the points that we're discussing today. So resting bitch face, that goes for men too. I don't know, it's not really fair they call it resting bitch, but
Resting
good point.
bastard face.
There we go, resting bastard. Thank you, Joni. I knew you could come up with that.
There'll be a
You,
comment on that one.
all right, number 5 here, moving on. Using absolutes. That was interesting. I actually hadn't heard that. That using words like have to, right now, never, I can't, but making just absolute statements. So that's something very off-putting.
So there's a closed mindedness that indicates that they think they know the black and white, the truth. It never, they never,
Mm-hmm.
I should, they should. All of those absolutes indicate the opposite of an open mind. So, and also can sound negative.
That's actually
Should
the
we
next
say?
point. That's the
Oh,
next point.
okay.
It's okay. You can
I
skip
always do
ahead.
that somehow.
Yeah, but you're always right. So it's all good.
That's another thing that can run people off. And we this isn't in the list either, is needing to be right. One, you actually think you're right all the time. Two, you think you have to be right. Somehow that controls the situation or keeps you safe. If you're right, you're
Mm-hmm.
safe. Those mindsets are very closed, and also they're a trap, and they will
Mm.
cause suffering. You cause your own suffering through the need to be right.
That's interesting because these absolute statements, absolutely, that indicates that you're right about something. I never thought of that. Interesting point. So I guess pay attention to that. Do you have a tendency to use that? And does that like kill a conversation? Do people leave
Yes.
but once you start talking? It's a great self-awareness point, I think. Well, and then on to the next one, as you said, setting a negative tone. There's nothing worse than somebody who just drags negativity into a date, and that can be done, in gosh, a lot of different ways, simply by just if you talk about how many bad dates you've been on, which actually happens quite frequently when people first start talking.
That's kind of sad to me, but it's a currency of conversation. So they don't know what else to talk about, or they think that that's interesting. One of the things I do in coaching, the first thing I ask people are, what are your wins this week? Because we're retraining the brain. We're retraining it to stop looking at the negative. So I have them look for what are your wins this week? I don't have
Mhm.
any wins. Really? How was your coffee this morning? Oh, it was so good. Well, there's a win. Your wins can be tiny. So when you go into that first date, you don't say all the, how was your day? And you
Mhm.
say all these bad things, these negative things. No, 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 no. And some people don't even realize they're constantly negative. And it's incredibly draining and exhausting for the people around you. So begin to retrain your brain by looking at what are the wins, what are the
Mhm.
positives, because what you focus on grows. What you focus on is your reality.
One great thing to be aware of is complaining. Do you complain a lot? That's one of the first things that'll start, a negative downward spiral. And so many people complain about so many things. And there's a lot to complain about these days, but don't do it. Not on a first date anyway. Well, there's a reason that, Saturday Night Live has that segment, Debbie Downer. I mean, it's something people do. For some reason, we tend to lean towards the negative. Well, just like with news. I mean, I don't know why negative is so much more interesting than positive, but somehow it is. Yet it will run people off.
And the
Yep.
Debbie Downer, that's the ego. They're constantly drawing attention through sucking the life out of other people with their negativity, but they're making themselves the center of everything.
Again, just a really, really important awareness
Mhm.
point that, do you tend to go negative? And if you do, then just course correct. Well, Joni, we're coming to the end of our segment. What didn't we talk about? Is there anything you want to add to what turns people away and you may not be aware of it?
We didn't really talk about the surface, which is, are you in a nice outfit? Are you clean? Did you brush your teeth? Did you take time with your appearance? Did you take time which honors the other person? Or did you just show up like, whatever?
Mhm.
What's your attitude and what's your intention? All of these things are very important.
That's it's interesting that you bring that up because I mean, you would think that to me is just so obvious. Why does that even need discussion? And every time I do research, that somehow comes up.
Hmm.
Somehow, people complain, like when you hear about what people complain about their first dates, the hygiene and grooming comes up. And it just surprises me. I just didn't realize that you have to be reminded of things like that. But if you do, well,
Well,
there you
I wonder
go.
too, Silka, this is interesting. I wonder also, as we get older, our eyesight is not as good.
Mm.
So we may not be seeing things. So, when you take photos, take a look at your photos. Are your teeth needing some brightening? Do you need a haircut?
Yeah. What's your presentation of yourself?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Are
Yeah.
you woolly? Really, don't take a moment and really look at, okay, if I were seeing myself for the first time, what would I see? Where can I do a little fine tuning? We're not talking about a full body makeover.
But so yeah, something that you don't see that maybe somebody else does. And usually people won't tell you because they're embarrassed to, or
Mhm.
it,
It just won't come back
like
to
you have
another
an
day.
extra black hair here or something that just
10X
come
mirrors
out.
are good for that.
Anyway,
Well,
Jody,
one more
thank you.
thing, I have a little term for that, by the way. If you're showing up and you haven't had a trim, guys, or you're not taking care of the beard, or ladies, you have the hair hanging out of your chin, it's called benign neglect.
Interesting. I've never
Yeah,
heard that.
benign neglect. So shave your legs, put a little conditioner in your hair, and feel confident. It makes you feel good.
Well, Joni, thank you. As always, I love having you on. I appreciate your time. I will link to all of your information. If you want to coach with Joni directly, we have the Calendly link in the show notes below. Lots of our viewers have already done that. And now you have your new course, Dating Reboot, Real Love After 50. Tell us about that real quickly.
It's on Zoom, so anybody can take it from anywhere. It's 6 weeks. It's an hour and a half each afternoon. Different segments, different topics, and there's experiential interaction, and you'll get to hear other people's stories, so you don't feel like you're alone, and learn how to completely reboot and get that confidence going out there. So it's also my way of making what I do available to people in a more affordable way. Then if you can't afford coaching, this is the way to go. You have access to me.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you, Joni. Well, again, everything is in the show notes, and I look so forward to our next conversation on Second Act TV.